Hello and welcome to the first Genius League Smart Bytes powered by HPE. I'm your host, Chris DeAppolonio, Chief Innovation Officer at Evil Geniuses, and I'm excited for our panel today, Return of the Man, From the Stage to the War Room, the first of many in the HPE Smart Bytes series. I'd like to welcome the man himself, Soham Chowdhury, current director of athletics for EG, former head of data science for Evil Geniuses, and an absolute legend when it comes to Counter-Strike, a major winning coach in the competitive space. Resume speaks for himself. Soham, welcome. Excited to have you.
Thanks for the welcome, Chris. That was too kind. I gotta make you do all my intros in life, my personal life as well.
Yes, and if anyone from Valve is watching, let's get this man his what is that? Your sticker in game? Is that right?
Don't remind me.
Okay.
Listen, just give me the trophy.
Yeah.
Just give me the trophy, and NACSGO will be right back to where it was in 2018. Trust me.
Well, let's going back to a little bit on your history. Let's go back to that. As the title of the panel kind of alludes to, you have extensive experience both kind of in the business world as well as in the competitive esports space. Can you kind of give us a little background on your career and how you got into esports and into an esports organization? So like your past in the corporate world, and then how you made the transition into esports.
Yeah. So I decided pretty early into my education. I would say going all the way back, this like 2006 when I was doing my undergrad, that I wanted to focus on the software side of engineering. So I think that's like the first kind of the biggest, I guess, path or the fork that I took. And really, then I had choices between like computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering. And I found pretty early that I wanted to kind of work on products that do things that you can touch and feel. So I chose electrical engineering back then. And that was like my first decision point, I guess you could say. So I did my bachelor's in double E, so that's electrical engineering and math, and foundations were good, but I was like leaving my undergrad, I felt kind of like I got a good foundation, a good base, but I wanted to kind of be more on the cutting edge of research. So I wanted to stay in school for a little bit longer, uh, which not many people probably want to do at that point. But
Yeah.
so I decided to do my graduate studies at Stanford in electrical engineering as well. But there you can choose kind of your emphasis areas, and that's really where I doubled down on. Okay, I'm gonna work on like the data side of it, the big data, the analytics, the machine learning side of things, and that you can probably say is my second decision point.
Yep.
And really, I think after Stanford, and while at Stanford, I should say Tesla, literally across the street from Stanford, and that was my first internship, kind of during my graduate studies. Excuse me, and I think at Tesla is really where I chose data science. Like that's a path.
Okay.
This was 2012, 2010 when I was starting, and there was no such thing as data science really as like a undergrad or graduate program, but it
Yeah.
started to become a thing in terms of like work. And data science at Tesla really meant like you're getting to work with data that no one has ever seen before. I mean, back then, this is 2010, electric vehicles were a brand new kind of idea. There's been like they released the Roadster, which was the first car, and now they're releasing the Model S. And we just got access to like the first million miles of electric vehicle data. So data
That's
that no
cool.
one has ever seen before. And that's, kind of where I started to think that working with data that no one has really seen before and applying kind of different principles that you learned in school was kind of what really got me up in the morning and excited to work on. That principle is what I brought into esports later on.
That's great. So, it's funny you mentioned like working on like brand new data, complex data that no one's really seen before. I feel like that's something that when you and I have talked in the past, obviously as we've worked together here at Evil Geniuses, like one of the allures and one of like the trappings of esports analytics is the fact that like we're looking at like some brand new data sometimes that either isn't well defined, isn't super clean, or just hasn't really been worked on before. And so is that where you're taking like a lot of the experience that you've done at Tesla and or some of your time at Google into your former role as head of data science and potentially your new role as director of athletics?
Yeah, I think at first I thought my traditional career path, which was like Tesla and then Google, is where I built a lot of these kind of data science foundational skills, leadership skills, communication skills, because you have to present to a lot of different types of people, whether it's a colleague, whether it's an executive, whether it's someone that's in a different department. And that's initially what I thought was happening. Really, I want to say if I backtrack, because esports has always been a passion area for me, and then, Counter-Strike has been around for 20 plus years at this point. I would say esports and like scrimming and getting on and playing with different people is really where the communication skills first start to get built. And you can't be a data scientist properly unless you know how to present information based on who you're talking to. The audience matters. I mean, being able to take the information and package it in a way that it's most relevant to that audience, whether it's like a player now, right, in my current role, or a coach, or in my previous role as head of data science, was it a fellow data scientist? Was it to you? Was it to Nicole? Yeah, to me, like that starts, I think, first you need to know how to speak to people. And really, forget about college, forget about work experience. That starts, I think, in your hobbies and passion areas. And for me, that was esports way back.
That's great. Yeah, with your current role, like obviously you've transitioned over from like full head of data science into director of athletics for CS:GO. You know, when working with the players and coaching staff, like how has how has data and like data literacy been something that you've tried to work on? Because it's sometimes a foreign subject for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the hardest things for sure is forget about data for a second. Let's talk about like the human aspect of it. If someone finds something that's working for them, they're finding success in it. And of course, players on EG, they're the highest tier of player and athlete in their respective games, right? So when someone has found success in their field, and then someone comes in and says, by the way, you can make this better, or this is another way that, trust me, this works, they're not going to be totally open to it from the start. And that's normal. I think the first thing is, as a data scientist, we have to be okay with the fact that there should be resistance, and there is. And the way to get around it is to first help them understand that we can do what you're already doing and make it more efficient, more optimized. So guess what? You're going to save time. We can help you review your own games. We can help you track, are you actually getting better in the areas that you think you're getting better in? We can help you understand if you're changing your mouse, changing your sensitivity because you miss a shot. What does that actually do to your game long term, or in a course of a week of practice? I think those are the important ways that to get player buy-in, it's super important to kind of empathize with the fact that they're just going through a human experience there as well. That they've found success, they're here for a reason. We're trying to make it better through data science, and we have the resources to do it. So let's find a way to work on it together. And here's some ways that you guys can get benefit right away. And this is where we can go in the future.
That's great. Yeah, I think we'll get a little bit more into CS:GO here in a little bit, but you talked about like working together to get some potential quick wins. Like, how do you feel like with the relationship and new partnership between Evil Geniuses and HPE? Like, what does that mean for us going forward now that we've kind of joined forces to put the work and foundation that you've built, to the next level?
HPE, I think it up levels pretty much everything we can do on the tech side. You can kind of think of it as our back end powerhouse to power some of these different tools that we're doing. And what I'm most excited about is the fact that we could not be doing real time analysis or close to real time analysis without having the support of a company and a brand like HPE. I think that's the area that I'm most excited about, because imagine if a coach or a player has feedback and as close to real time as possible. That's expensive, that's time consuming, and it's not easy to do without support of the engineering infrastructure of HPE.
Yeah, the resources are immense, and I'm excited, for us to continue kind of showcasing this partnership throughout the rest of throughout the next couple of years, and really seeing some of the huge wins that we can have working together. So let's go into CS:GO. I know there's probably a ton of people watching here because of your status in the game and want to hear a little bit more about the competitive space. So we're gonna put a little data twist on it, though. What makes CS:GO and Counter-Strike a little bit more unique in comparison to other games and titles that EG plays in when it comes from a data perspective? What can we do with the data, and what can we do in CS:GO around analytics potentially that we aren't able to do in other titles?
That's a great question because it allows us to highlight the fact that Valve, who I think a lot of people know here, are pretty hands off as well on the tournament side of things. That's why we have third party tournaments. That's why we have so many different major tournament organizers that get represent this game, right? And it's no different to how they actually showcase their data in the game. They have these files. They're called demo files. They're basically in-game replay files, and basically they're giving you access to a gold mine of information, and especially the ones that are based off of HLTV, GoTV, that records like at both perspectives of the team. These are the official recordings that are out there for all the pro games, all the semi-pro games that are on HLTV. Those demo files are so rich because they have information at such a high frame rate. It's 128 times per second, number one, which is beyond any other game. So 128 times per second per player across however many rounds were played in that game is how much data we actually have. And in that data set, there are things like positional data, but this is a 3D game. So it also has things like, where are you actually looking in the game with your crosshair? Were you seen by an enemy in this moment, in this tick? Were you able to, when you shot at them first, did they know you were there? Did they react to you? And like that's how you can identify things like, are you a good flanker? Are you a good lurker? Are you winning battles that are easy, or are you winning battles that are hard, where both people are looking at each other? And I think that kind of data does not exist in other games, and that's something that Valve, because they're so kind of lax with the type of data and the type of guidance and the guidelines they have, they give access to everything.
That's great. I mean, helps when we have somebody like you to kind of make heads and tails of it a little bit, along with the rest of our data science team, and translate that to the players and coaching staff as well. You mentioned obviously the demo files. Like, how has since 2018 when you won a major, right? Like, how has the application of data in the space changed? What kind of tools are being used by teams across the board?
Yeah, I think if I remember back to like 2015, 16, I think the main tools that were out there were taking the demo file that I'm talking about and representing it in a 2D format in a web browser.
Mm-hmm.
So there are several tools I think from back then that help you see the demo in a 2D representation, so you can quickly go through the rounds and you don't have to load up the game in order to watch the demo back inside of the game. And that was super helpful for sure. From a review perspective, that definitely cut down time. But it wasn't like the best representation of the game, and there were no tools that actually analyze some of these statistics, these metrics that we're talking about. If you wanted to do like a custom metric, such as try to figure out what part of the map we need control of to really maximize our chance to win a round, there's no analysis or tools that were available back then. And really, I don't think they've ever been available until EG did it internally.
Wow.
And to me, I think that's the area that I'm most excited about. Is the visual aspect is very important for sure, because you have to be able to visually showcase exactly what you're analyzing. Otherwise, no one's going to look at it. But at the same time, you do want to be able to do some of the more advanced analytics with positional data. Are you a good player because your HLTV rating is high, or are you a good player because your HLTV rating can be made a little bit better and a little bit more unique to your role? And if you're looking for someone you're looking for, let's say, an anchor player, you don't want someone who's getting a bunch of eco frags or a bunch of kills that are easy. You want someone who's getting kills when they're coming to their site, and they're difficult because they're one-on-one duels, for example, right? So I think it changes completely what you can analyze if you have these custom metrics that you can calculate, which really weren't available back then. And more recently, in the last couple of years, really at EG, as far as I'm aware, have been developed.
Well, let's talk about players a little bit. We've been out in the news a lot, right? We have like literally every Counter-Strike player under the sun, from some Redditors and who want to say that, right? And we launched the Blueprint Initiative earlier this year. What are some, and we'll go into the Blueprint in a little bit because I think that'll be an interesting discussion around potentially how we're using data with those rosters. But like, what are some ideal qualities you look for in a player? You talked about certain roles that you're looking for a player to fill, how much of those qualities vary depending upon what position they may be on your team?
That's an interesting twist because the first thing I think about when I look for players isn't tied to their role primarily, because there's I would say like a first set of qualities that I feel like all professionals should have. And if I had to summarize them, they would be game knowledge, and I can break it down a little bit, but really game knowledge, as well as culture fit. Do you fit within the type of leadership structure we have with our coaching staff, our in-game leader, and the rest of the team, the rest of EG? And probably soft skills, like, to put it simply. I mean, some people, the communication skills that you have coming into EG, being a professional organization, they should be on the high end. And if they're
Yep.
not, and we see potential in the other areas, of course we're going to work with you, right, to make that better. But I think there's a few things, like I said, game knowledge, culture fit, and those soft skills that really matter a lot. And to me, the soft skill aspect of it does get undervalued in some recruitment processes I've seen over the years, and it's something that I think EG is doing a really good job about. I mean, how do you organize your day?
Mm-hmm.
What do you have a corrective feedback loop in your life? I'm getting a little bit existential here, but in terms of if people just kind of live their life, including their profession, and they just have a bunch of people around them saying, "Yeah, you're doing great. Everything you're doing is amazing. Keep doing it." You're not gonna improve after a certain point, right? So I think
Yeah.
those are important questions to ask players, ask coaching staff members, anyone who's getting hired at EG, to build a competitive team.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think stuff that's not just for CS:GO, right? Like a lot of those big things, three things you mentioned are probably relevant and necessary for every team and title we're looking for players in, but a little bit harder to much harder to quantify and measure. Like it's not as easy to scale as like say like hey go like we're doing for Valorant, like go do this aim lab playlist and we'll get some statistics on you, right? Like it's a lot harder to measure and quantify. Um, is that something that just is done in the trials and scrimming process with a player? Is that done from like anecdotal information from other teams and players that they've played with in the past? Like how do you like measure those soft skills?
A great way to look at how data science can help with that aspect, even if it seems like it's subjective, is we want basically whatever subject matter experts would say. Let's say coaching staff or pro players, they're watching scrims of, let's say, an up and coming talent, giving us their feedback. We want the data science output to be as close to what they would be saying as possible. That's the holy grail, right? Well, how do we get there? Well, just like any other machine learning algorithm, it's you need to give it feedback in terms of, this is what good looks like, this is what bad looks like, this is what okay looks like depending on the situation. And
Okay.
a big crux of how to do that, and bring the subjective into the objective as much as possible, because really data science and any computer based algorithms are, you want to be as objective as possible, otherwise you're asking it to do things that it's not meant to do. But to get as close as possible to getting that kind of similar level of insight as subject matter experts, is first create a feedback loop, so that, hey, this you identified this as a good play, it really wasn't that great of a play, right? And you give that feedback. That can be an automated kind of tagging feature. Imagine if we have a review tool and we're identifying all of the post-plan situations that we had in this week of practice, automatically tagged. And then
Hmm.
suddenly, maybe you see a few that were tagged extremely well as, we won this round and you should have won it. The win probability was high. Cool. We acknowledge that. We watch it ourselves because we're going to be reviewing these games anyway, reviewing these practice games anyway. So it learns that this was tagged properly. Then there might be some where maybe the computer thinks that this was an important round to highlight, and really it was as simple as someone missed a shot. Not that important, really, right? So that feedback loop is really what helps a lot in this process.
Hmm. That's it. Really interesting look behind the curtain there. Appreciate that.
Sure.
With the feedback, let's talk about Blueprint. I mentioned it earlier. Um, for those on the call who are unaware, like Blueprint is our initiative for Counter-Strike and to build a foundation for North American Counter-Strike and bring it back to prominence. Right, we've got four rosters: EG Blue, Black, White, and Gold. Um, from your point of view, right? Like this is pretty unprecedented from as far as I know in the Counter-Strike scene. How has it been different for you compared to when there's just your run-of-the-mill 5 players within your CS:GO system?
Oh, well, first of all, I'm never bored because there's always something to watch.
That's
With
true.
having 4 teams, I mean, there's legitimately. I mean, I was just talking to my mom about this the other day. There's literally always something of EG going on,
Yeah.
and she loves it. I mean, I love it too. It's that's the first thing, And
Unless
the
you like to
second thing,
sleep at
yeah,
all.
exactly. I mean, sleep will come, right?
Yeah.
When you lose, you sleep. If you win, no, no. But I think the one of the most insane things about having these many players of high quality in one organization is we can clearly make our practice structure more optimized. Right now, which I'm really not a fan of, the standard for practicing in Counter Strike is you play against other professional teams that you might play next week in an event or the week after. At some point, you're going to play them.
Yep.
First of all, that's if you brought that up to someone who plays traditional sports or someone who's in any kind of hyper competitive environment, they would just be like, "Why are you doing that?" Right?
Yeah.
And I get it. I'm not against it. I played professionally and I coach professionally, so I get it. There's value to it. But that's the standard. That's the
Yep.
default. So that's the first thing that I'm like, that's odd. The second thing is you don't get to frame the practice in any specific way. You have to hope that the other team allows you to play in a way that you've planned today's practice to be focused
Right.
on. There are many days of practice, in my experience, that you might go over areas of improvement for your own team, and you may never get to test if those areas work properly. If your rotations are things that you're focusing on for nuke today, and you
Hmm.
play nuke, you might play nuke 3 times today, but you may not get to practice those rotations as well as you wanted to because you're not in positions because the other team might be practicing something else that's totally on the counter. So
Yep.
the point is I feel like those two first points already make practice super unproductive, right? So
Yeah.
while now we have teams with skill levels on equal footing that have different play styles, we can ask them to play in a way that mimics maybe one of our other opponents that are coming up in an event, their play style, and let's figure out what our weaknesses are against that play style. I'm talking about this is the goal, right? This is going to take some time to get proper, and I think that the beauty of it is going to be the fact that we can help the other team internally also by just for the sake of the coaching staff are collaborating with each other constantly. The coach, let's say Daniel Warburg, might be speaking with Axt on our EG Black team and say that this is how we're going to be helping you guys today by working on these areas. Axe will not tell his players, right? But Axe will know,
Hmm.
and he might tailor the game plan and the practice plan for the day with that knowledge in mind because the coaches are collaborating for practice and the players will not know and they're going to go into the game and be like, oh, this is tougher than we expected, and they're going to get more reps that are relevant. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah. Really focused training. Rather than just like we hope we get in this situation
Yep.
and can practice it.
Yep.
Uh, I also heard there's like when you talk about like shared information and knowledge and kind of knowledge sharing across these teams, right? Like I think that was something at least with one of our teams this year that where like when one is good at one map, right? One might be better at the other, right? Like how do we kind of just trade that strategy back and forth so we can help help everybody improve map to map. I think I recall something with one of our teams earlier this year.
Yeah, this happened. This happened between EG Black and EG White. We had a joint training camp session in our headquarters in Seattle, and what was really great about it being in person is that we had a day where the in-game leaders swapped between the two teams and talked about the map that were considered the permabans. For
Hmm.
people listening, that's the map that we don't play. There's usually 7 maps in competitive play, obviously, and generally teams play 6, and one is like a permanent ban. Well, what happened is we took a day and we swapped IGLs, the in-game leaders, and we talked about the maps that the team was weak on. And then we started scrimming on those maps, trying to get more reps on it. And that led to a very successful run for our EGY team, who was part of an event at that time, who surprised another team thinking that, oh, we can just pick, it was Vertigo, we can just pick Vertigo against EGY, they're not going to know how to play it.
Yep.
And, it wasn't the case. We figured out how to play it. So, and that was large part, we definitely could not have done that without having a structure of multiple teams within one organization. There's no way.
Yeah. That's just impossible. Obviously, like we're also looking at how do we develop talent through this, right? Where we pair some of some superstars and veterans with some upcoming players. How do you feel, with the current like ecosystem in Counter-Strike? Are there opportunities for new players to really come in and grow and be exposed to these organizations that are supporting North American CS?
I think there's more opportunity now than ever in North American CS, and it feels like it was the opposite for a little bit because Valorant took off and it's been doing great, which I think is awesome, by the way. But Valorant took off. We were in the pandemic. There was less events in North America, just by the virtue of it being difficult to come to North America to get visas and all of that. So there were logistics hurdles. There was another game that was popular, that took away. There was some more money to be made there because the partnership program hadn't been released in Valorant. Those were all hurdles, and yet here we are in Counter-Strike. And if you look at the top 10 teams in Counter-Strike today, I think each and every one of them have players that maybe 1 to 2 years ago you'd be like, who are these people?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? Well, that means that two things. One is obviously the veterans on those teams have recognized the need to bring in newer talent to help them kind of feel refreshed and also add in a new level of energy to their own teams. And second, that it's possible to be a younger player who's climbing the ranks, making a team with friends in ESEA and climbing the ranks there, scrimming a lot. You don't have to be noticed right away. You just have to continue getting better. Because guess what? People are going to be looking. I'm going to be looking for you. I'm going to be looking for you. If you're doing well in your leagues and you're playing the right way, and when you happen to be on stream because someone else on your team is streaming, playing FPL, FPLC, Cash Cups, whatever they are, guess who's going to be listening? That's literally part of the roles of building better teams for the future. People like me are going to be listening, and that's the best way to catch Riot.
Love to see healthy ecosystem and path to pro, and obviously, like we are looking, we are scouting, like with HPE, joining Evil Geniuses, like are there specific tools, or like how are you potentially looking at finding new talent, and what kind of stats and data are you looking at potentially for new players and people who may be listening who want to see, like want to work on things, as you mentioned, to continue to improve?
I'm most excited about their machine learning toolkit. HPE's toolkit for ML and AI will allow us to essentially relate an action you take in the game to how much improvement of the round win percentage you're adding onto it. So correlating essentially, your decision to make a poor buy all the way to freeze time, all the way to a post plant situation where, it's a 3v3 post plant, you're a CT, you've decided to go for the retake, right? And historically, we've analyzed now with HP's help all of the CSGO demos that have been on HLTV, right? That's the goal. Now with that, we know you shouldn't be going for this retake here, right? And of course, like, are there opportunities where you should be going because the if you don't, you're gonna lose the game? Like you're literally at your opponent has 15 rounds. Well, of course.
Yep.
But over time, the algorithm would learn that. So my point is the ultimate kind of use of being able to leverage this engineering infrastructure from HPE is to relate an action that you take in the game to how much improvement of winning does that correlate to. And we can go so many places with that. And you know what? We're not too far away from getting there.
Man, that is incredible to think, but like you are right with the technology and the stack that they have, the tech stack that they have. Like this is something that is close. With that said, right, I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, where like the action you take may have had a specific like outcome, right? Like, or projected outcome probability of winning the round. Like, how do you help a player change the way they play based upon that insight? Because a player, like, say you luck out and a player's willing to accept that, right? Like, that is over the course of all the scrims you just mentioned, right? Which is a huge sample size. But then the player could try it once, fails immediately, right?
Yep.
And like, so this small sample size, right, is just one time. But then they take that as like, it doesn't work, I'm not going to try it again. Like,
Yep.
how do you work with players? And is it challenging to work with players to get them to accept data points like that or insights, especially when the sample size and this is small and the stakes are high?
Chris, it sounds like you've been in esports and around players for a while.
Well, not too long, not as long as you, but enough to be
No, but
dangerous.
you hit it. You're bringing up a really important point, which is if we live and die by something being a success, and that's the only time we're gonna learn, then I think that's a mindset problem. That's not a data problem. That's not a player problem. That's a problem of the mindset you have in terms of, are you willing to improve and be a little bit more open minded about what it takes to improve. And to me, the way I define success is, are we doing things that the subject matter expert, in this case the professional player, are we doing things in the data science team that will mimic what the the subject matter expert's opinion would be? And I'll explain what that means. So when we go into a week of practice in Counter-Strike, generally the coach will prepare, these are the areas of improvement that we're going to be working on this week. And they get there by evaluating the last week of practice, maybe the last event we participated in. And comes a game plan, the practice plan for this week or this day or the next 2 days, whatever it is. Well, we can automate that by analyzing the data. And how close are we to the coach's game plan or the practice plan for this week? Are we identifying gaps or the weaknesses that the coaches would also have done? Are we actually getting more? Are we including weaknesses or areas of improvement that the coaches didn't even think about? And I think those are the areas that we're like, okay, we're doing a good job here with data science. And these other areas that the coaches or the players of themselves come up with, we didn't capture. There's a gap here. Let's figure out why. So again, it's about this feedback loop. And I think that if we can explain to the players that we have this feedback loop, you can tell us that this was a really terrible idea that we proposed, and you can tell us it's great, and it's just going to go right back in and make this process next time even better. And I think that's the mindset shift that hopefully players can get behind. And of course, in our interview process, when we evaluate who to bring on, we definitely have a piece of that about how willing are you to work with data, and how willing are you to help make that process better, because at the end of the day, it helps themselves and helps the team.
Yeah. And how, like, I feel like you'd need some pretty strong, like, how important is it to have strong coaching staff when it comes to something like this?
Huge. I think it's probably the most important thing, because in the situations like this where we're working on data sets that historically have not been worked on, you don't have a sense of ground truth unless you have a strong coaching staff that you believe in, and they're also giving you a sense of what baseline, what good looks like, what bad looks like. You definitely, it's a very collaborative effort. In fact, I mean, at EG, I think in the last 6 months, I've seen the gaming teams work with data science more than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And this is across the board, like from scouting in terms of blueprint, all the way to, are we doing a good job? You know, there's when new maps come out, for example, right? How do we shift our focus area when something changes in the game, or the meta, so to speak, when the meta is shifting? Are we able to track that it's shifting before someone else does, before the rest of the community or the rest of the professional scene does?
Yeah.
What does that look like? What does the meta shift even mean? We have to define these things, right? And a data scientist who does not have, let's say, core game knowledge of Counter-Strike, they're not going to sit there and just come to that conclusion by themselves. Why would they? That's not their core competency. So let's bring in these strong coaching staff members to help answer these questions, and it becomes a collaboration. That's beautiful.
What, with that, like taking over CS:GO at EG, what was like the defining factor that made you really want to return to CS:GO as that director of athletics, versus like continuing, I would say, your career as a data scientist?
That was a really tough decision point for me. Earlier this year, I think it was maybe June or July, something like that this year.
Yeah.
And first of all, I think it's a good problem to have because it was difficult for me because two passion areas for me are data science and esports, the competitive side of esports, right? So the fact that I was having trouble making the decision, I think is a testament to I'm in a spot that I really want to be in EG. And to me, it was a timing thing. It's who was best suited at EG in that moment to elevate our CS:GO program, and I happen to be one of them.
Yep.
And so I think in order to make best use of my skill set at the time, I think that choosing to be a director of athletics and try to elevate our CS:GO program, put it back on the map, and get it back on track essentially. And focus area was let's hire the strongest coaching staff possible. Let's bring our current players and elevate them to a point where that do they have around them as little excuses as possible in order to perform. Let's see how they do then. So I think these are areas that I think it was really exciting for me to come back and help, and I get to work with data science as well. It's they're my neighbors at EG, so
Yeah. I mean, it's seems like almost like a perfect fit for you, as you mentioned, like with your background. I will say from like our end on the data science and analytics side, it's nice to have a conduit and somebody who's very data literate to be on the other side of the house, um, who can distill down like a lot of this information and help kind of translate why we're doing these things and like what possibilities are out there. So it's been a nice partnership between the two. We are almost through with all of our questions with Soham. However, if you have questions if you're watching, please put them in the chat. We will be getting to those as we have time here. Got a couple more questions for you, Soham, and then we'll open it up to the viewers. What
sweet.
what would you say like has helped you get to where you are? And then what advice do you have for any future Sohams who want to become the man or the woman in CS:GO or in data science?
That's a difficult question, honestly. And the reason it's difficult to me is, first of all, I think this starts way before esports and way before data science. I think that the first thing I did properly in this path or this trajectory was that I took school seriously enough to build my discipline and work ethic. And it doesn't have to be school. You can replace school with whatever else, but you have to find something relatively early on that helps you build your discipline and your work ethic. Because without those two things, you might be the most talented person, but you'll start projects and end them quickly and give up. And it's just because you don't have that discipline built in to your routine to see things through end, even if that end is failure. Getting comfortable with failure, I think, is one of the most important skills you can have. And the only way you can get comfortable is to try different things, right? So I think, like, to me, find something, whether it's school or something else, that really helps you build those two things. And uh, it will allow you to kind of find that day-to-day happiness that you're learning or you're working in an area that you actually like, not just something that you feel like is good to work on. I think there's it's a stereotype that a lot of folks just end up in, let's say, computer science or engineering because there's a lot of money to be made there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can comfortably say that most people I know in esports that are making insane amounts of money, players, they're not engineers, they're not computer scientists. They found their passion area, they grinded very hard, and they found support. They weren't afraid of failures. These are the common themes. It's not that you have to go into a certain field.
All right, so discipline, work ethic, getting comfortable with failure,
Yep.
and finding your happiness. Pretty good 4 points for anyone out there. I got two more for you, and then we will get to some fan questions here. You talked about map changes, right? Valve recently removed Dust 2 from the competitive map pool, brought in Anubis. I will have to admit I have not played on Anubis yet, so I can only imagine for you and the team, this may throw a wrench into a lot of things and force you to change up how you play and practice. Like, how do you adapt to a massive change like that when a a map that's been around forever, comes off the board.
I'm gonna pull a page from Warburg's Twitter feed, which has been on fire lately. Which is I'm super happy with the removal of Dust 2. Honestly, I didn't necessarily like that map. I mean, for the people that play the game that are here, what do? You start T side, freeze time starts. You either go B, you mid to B, you take cat control, you just rush long. Like there's 4 things you do on every single round of Dust 2. That doesn't sound that intriguing to me. You know why? Because it's not as complex as it could be, and a lot of times rounds are won or lost in the first 20 seconds on that map. So I'm actually pretty happy with the change. That being said, Anubis is a very interesting map in its current state, but I'm very confident that Valve, who've historically released maps that no one really has played in the professional scene, they take feedback pretty well in the first few months and make it into a very playable state. There's an event coming up though, which I'm assuming the current state of Anubis will be played in, which is like the Blast World Finals.
Yep.
That's going to be interesting because I don't think the current state of the map is amazing. Shout out to Munster, who's coach for EG White, who's done some theory crafting, and I agree with him in the sense that there's one side is definitely way better thought out in terms of professional play than the other. So okay. I think it's going to be exciting. I'm happy with D2 being removed, but Anubis is probably 2 to 3 iterations away from being a professionally playable map. But like just all the other maps, Overpass was weird when it came out. Cobble was weird when it came out. It'll be fun.
Will it be like Ancient, where like nobody played it it was like always banned for quite some time?
Yeah, unless Valve, I don't know if you remember, but the very first time Cobble and Overpass was released at the first major, there was a coin flip for the best of one. There was 3 maps left when you banned down to 3 maps, and it was a coin flip to decide what the last map was supposed to be. And somehow Valve, their algorithm was choosing Cobble or Overpass quite often. So if they go back to that kind of system, we might see Anubis a lot more. But honestly, I think a lot of teams see there's a strategy aspect to it, honestly, too, to be a little bit more serious, is that if you get good on a map that just got released, I mean, you obviously have an inherent advantage. You're starting from the same level as your peers. You're not going against someone else who has 10 years of experience on Dust 2. You're going with someone, playing against someone who has the same number of months of experience on Anubis. So if you get good on it, if you like learning stuff and you like theory crafting, you're going to have an advantage for sure.
Yeah, it forces them to ban that out, right? And you can get another map that you may want to play.
Yep.
And then they also changed the size of the AUP magazine. Like, does that actually like matter? Are you looking at magazine efficiency for your AUPer? Does 5 or 10 really make a difference?
Not for Pwn alone, because he's gonna just use a Max 7 all game and be totally fine. No, but I think for most AUPers, there's like 2 set of AUPers. One style where they just shoot through anything possible. They get smoked out, take a shot. They get behind a wall, take a shot. They fall back, they just shoot into the ground. I mean, it's just like those AUPers are gonna definitely have some issues because they're gonna run out of bullets. And I've already seen some funny clips where you think you have bullets left, you go for a repeat, just reload. You're just gonna die. And I mean, I think people are gonna get used to that pretty quickly. But the major effect will most likely be that you have to be a little bit more sneaky as an AUPer now. You can't just let your presence be known because you don't have too many shots to take. So I think it's gonna be a lot of if you're in a very advanced position, I think you're most likely not gonna be having like that multi-kill potential because you're gonna have to take your shot and fall back and be smarter with how you use the limited bullets. But in terms of, is it going to make a huge difference on who the top AUPers are in the world? I don't think so.
But it may make a difference in terms of gameplay. Like, do you think teams will get more aggressive if like they know somebody is holding down like long A or something like that, where like they may challenge it now that they have a smaller magazine?
I think counting op shots will be interesting on maps that the AUPers don't fall back all the way, and we have noise cues the entire time being an opponent. For example, like if you're opping B on Inferno, it's such a small space that like if the AUPer who typically before the change just stayed around a car holding down the banana lane for all rounds, there's going to be a point where we're going to start counting bullets. And I think like there's going to be sections of those, I think, in various maps where it might be playing a role. But overall, I think it's not going to make a huge difference because we're just going to counter that negative with having a quicker rotate or just not shooting and just jump spotting and stuff like that. So I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in the top scene. It will make a big difference, I think, in the low to mid tier of Counter-Strike, though.
Well, thank you. I will now. We're going to open up to some questions from the audience here. We've got Silver Scrapes with asking, what is a good path for youth development for the NACS scene? So I don't know if this is coming as a player, but like, what is a good path for youth development in NACS?
To be honest, the best for sure right now is if you get into the pug scene, the pickup game scene early, just be aware that that's not how you're going to get noticed by the people that actually matter. Meaning that you might rise in the pug scene and destroy and turn a few heads, but you're going to turn a few heads of the people that really base a lot of their awe-stricken moments on skill, and that's not the only thing that's going to get you noticed. That being said, you should involve pugs as a part of your routine, but primarily I think it should be if you're focusing on kind of climbing up the scene and being a semi-professional or a professional, make a team, whether it's with friends initially, whether it's just posting on the forums, on Reddit, whatever it is. Make a team, play ESEA, which happens to be the best league environment right now. And whether you start an open or IM or main, doesn't matter. Just grind matches, because eventually, if your team is good and you get enough like-minded people on that team, you are going to move up. There's been so many stories of people who started an open that end up in advanced, which is a tier right below semi-professional. Open to advanced can happen in the course of 2 to 3 seasons. That's less than a year.
Wow.
And of course, by the time you're in open, you should be knowing the basics of the game, because you're in a league environment. League and open, of course, like to me, open sounds the most beginner level, and it is. But the fact that it's in a league environment means you should have some basics, probably have done some matchmaking, some pugs before that point. That's the best way, for sure.
That's great. So definitely an opportunity. We've got another one. If someone is just starting out leveraging data in esports like CSGO, Valorant, so FPS titles, what skills or tools would you recommend mastering most?
I think in data science in general, right now, the meta, so to speak, is you got to get good at SQL, Python, in terms of like hard skills, in terms of what languages you want to get good at, because that's just used pretty much everywhere in data science. And I think on top of that, there is enough publicly available data out there. Shout out to OPI, which is like a Python-based Counter-Strike parser, that you have access to data sets. That if you want to work specifically on Counter-Strike, let's say, or League of Legends or whatever, there are like different data sets out there that you can play around with. And once you start to get a little bit better, you can do things like calculate the utility damage for each player on a team. For the people that know how to do this, it might be a simple query, but for the people that don't, that getting to that level might seem simple, but it's if you can do that, you can do a lot already, because now you know how to work with the demo file. You know how to work with grouping things by players on a team, then rolling up it to the team average. I mean, that's a lot already. And guess what? Now you can start, when you start to see these job requirements open up. We need some analysts for a team, or we need an intern for an esports organization. It's very useful to be able to showcase or talk about the fact that you might have used Python, SQL, Excel even to do some of these analyses. So definitely those would be helpful.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you think about, we had our HPE intern this year, Rushi, right? Significantly skilled, was able to jump into a lot of the tools we're already building and using based upon his knowledge. So, and obviously, if you are interested, like we do have internship cohorts twice a year. So keep your eyes peeled. We usually announce it on social media, evilgeniuses.gg/careers, I believe it is, as well as on LinkedIn if you follow us there. So if you're looking to get involved in it, we do have openings, should have openings coming up around, I don't know, next summertime or so. All right, another question from the audience. we talked about data and tools. Like, what do you think the future of esports data looks like? I don't know if this is in terms of analytics, type of data we're getting. But
That's great. I always, whenever I think about the future of esports analytics, I'm thinking about real time analysis for pro teams, for even casual fans or folks that are into sports betting and things like that. I think real time data is really exciting because it helps people understand one, what are they actually looking at. If you imagine you have a companion to watching the major on whatever streaming platform is popular at that time, and you start to see someone just gets a kill and boom, like you see the win probability lower by this amount or raised by that amount. I think that kind of stuff is cool because I think when you're learning the game as a spectator, you have different focus areas than if you're learning the game as a player. And I think melding those two is something that would be really interesting. And it's been done in traditional sports over and over again. I know when I watch basketball, for example, I mean, something as simple as seeing the shot clock, in augmented reality on the actual court, that adds quite a bit of, I can focus on the action, right? So I think like that kind of stuff just makes the viewing experience better. And how do we keep esports alive? Well, we got to keep the viewers happy, right? So I think that kind of stuff is very important.
how do you feel like this is not a fan question, but like you talked about real time analytics. How do you feel like CS:GO would change if coaches were able to actually like implement things in real time during competition?
Yeah, that is a very, I think it would hopefully elevate the level of all teams. I think what you don't want is only if certain teams are able to do it, and then you have like a competitive advantage that's too, it's swaying too far on one side. What to me is fair is that all professional teams should know how to get access to the data, and then what you do with the data is the secret sauce,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you invest like EG has in data scientists and a division for analytics, we should have the competitive advantage because now we know we're thinking a lot. We're working with our coaching staff on what we do with the data. But getting access to the data should never be the barrier. I think that should be that should be the easiest part of this, and then you have no reason to not expand and invest in analytics like EG has. We should have way more esport organizations that do this.
Yeah. Uh, Preaching to the choir over here, obviously. When you talk about this is actually a question from the audience. When you talk about game like teams having access to data, what titles in your experience have had accessible data? And then have you had issues like with data acquisition and how do you solve for it?
Yeah, I think probably this is an area that Riot has done a pretty good job because they have these publicly available APIs that you don't need to pay anything for to get access to, and it gives you a pretty good set of data to work with. I mean, if I was starting out coding and working in Python or whatever it is, and I wanted to use my knowledge in coding to try to bridge esports and data science, I could very easily just sign up for the public API, whether it's Riot or whatever, and work on some data that is coming, that's live. It's pretty similar to what you would get if you're a professional team. So now you can say you worked on this publicly available data set and you're maybe like 3-4 degrees away from working on a professional data set. So a professional team would be much more likely to hire you. You have relevant experience. If someone at EG applied and they knew how to work with the solo queue API, like the back of their hand, that is a huge advantage in the
Mm-hmm.
hiring process, right? So I think like to me, so Riot has done a really good job in my opinion. I think Valve, now that we have some of these third party APIs on GitHub and things like that, like OPI, that give access to parsing out data from demo files, it's easier than ever in my opinion to work on some coding aspects of and analysis aspects of Counter-Strike as well. I think Dota 2 as well.
Yep.
It's getting to the point where it has a lot of data that's publicly available as well. I think it's even better than CS:GO. Rocket League has some, I think, aspects as well that's publicly available. I think there's some cool sites about Rocket League as well. So to me, the hardest part is if you're trying to just get better at analyzing data, there's a lot of resources. If you're trying to make a business out of esports analytics, that's a different question altogether because then you're
Mm-hmm.
competing against, depending on how many people are already working on League of Legends data, right, or Counter Strike data. So that's a different question in my opinion, because you have to think about, does this matter to people enough so that they'll come to your website or spend a lot of money? And like, you probably can't do that just by yourself. You're gonna have to join a company and figure things out together. And I think like that's a slightly different question, but at the same time, don't focus on that when you're first starting out. That should never be the reason you get into something. It should be that you like working on the data.
I think we got time for maybe 2 more questions. How do you work data into a player's regime or mindset when they're super dependent on long-term habits?
I think the easiest way is you play into the fact that those types of players are already pretty self-reflective, because we're talking about their habits and their long-term habits here. So help them track things they already track, and make it even as simple as, here is what you're already doing in a nice to package app and on the web. Go and check out from week to week how you're doing based off of your current settings in Counter-Strike. If you're changing your settings, this is how you're playing instead. These are your average stats based on the two. Those are easy ways to really get buy-in. I think another easy way is, if they believe, there's certain things that you can't deny as players, which is, if you record your communication and your screen recording in professional play, and in discussion someone says, no, I don't think you said that, and someone says, no, I really feel like I said that, well, go back and check it. So how do you make that process more efficient, easier to search? Investing in areas like that, where you're going to be solving a critical issue that comes up in day-to-day practice anyway, are really good ways to get player buy-in, team buy-in, because this is going to make their life easier. They're just going to get to the answers they're going to get to anyway, just way quicker. So those are good ways to get buy-in.
What do you think, you've been at Evil Geniuses, I mean, what, going on 3 years now or so?
Yeah, just a little bit over 3 years. Crazy.
Yeah, that is that is crazy. What would you say is your favorite memory or highlight over those 3 years?
Man, that's a good question. To be honest, I think there's two. One is just the way that I ended up on EG in the first place. I think pitching the vision of data science in esports to Nicole, this was, late 2019, that was a pleasure, because she also comes from a very data sciencey and mathematical background, and it was very, very refreshing to talk to someone that gets it from the start. It was never a question of, is this going to happen in 6 months? It was a multi-year initiative from the start. We're multiple years in, right? 3+ years in, and here we are. Like I said earlier, I think EG has been the leader. We're leading by example in many different fronts when it comes to this aspect, esports analytics. So I think that's definitely like a favorite memory of mine, thinking back to the fact that the timing just happened to work out. I was looking to leave C9 at the time. Nicole was a very tech savvy, statistically minded CEO of an amazing brand in EG that people were loving to have back in Counter-Strike and other esports. So that was great. Definitely a favorite memory. And I think secondly, I think just the fact that I can be impacting the competitive and the data science aspect of Counter-Strike still. Just that opportunity, I think, makes me happy day to day.
Nicole is definitely a quant, and this speaks to her too.
Yeah.
All right, lightning round. We got like 2 minutes to go. Favorite map? Favorite competitive map?
Inferno.
Least favorite competitive map?
Dust 2. Oh, current Mirage.
Favorite weapon?
AK-47.
Favorite pistol?
250. P250.
All right. And then a fun one. Did you know that FaZe Clan blew a 15-11 lead in the 2018 Boston Major to Cloud9, giving NA its first and only major in CS:GO history?
It felt almost like I experienced it.
Yeah, you may have. Well, Soham, this has been a pleasure. Before we close it out, where can people find you if they want to connect or follow your experiences and at EG?
For better or worse, my DMs on Twitter have always been open. So at Valens, Valens there, if you want to reach out for more kind of structured or business-like discussion, is my first name, Soham, Soham at evilgeniuses.gg.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining us for our very first ever Genius League Smart Bytes powered by HPE. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Join us back here in roughly a week, December 15th, for the data behind the league, a conversation with Andrew Barton, Kelsey Moser, where we're going to discuss the importance of data during free agency in League of Legends and the LCS. So see you then. Thank you and have a good rest of the week.
Have a great one.